Hello everybody and welcome back to another Pokémon Emerald video. Today I will be playing through the game with the other Nido of the first generation, namely Nidoking. Compared to Nidoqueen, the King has a bit more attack and special attack, and that is generally good for a solo run. So hopefully he will have an easy time getting through the game too. For the rules, I can only use my starter in combat, I cannot use items from my bag in battle, I can't raise my evasion in any way, and I can't use cheats or glitches. To make up for the increased attacks, Nidoking has a slightly smaller move pool, and also the learn set is not as good in my opinion. To be more precise, I think that Trash is worse than Body Slam. In this game, Trash only has 90 power, so slightly more than Body Slam, but it does not have the paralysis, it locks yourself into that move, and you get confused after a couple of turns. So definitely not worth the 5 extra base power. The starting moveset is also a bit different. I have Peck, Focus Energy and Poison Sting. While those give me a bit more type coverage, the base power is very low and so I will rarely use them over Double Kick. At the start of the game, that move is very powerful because it is super effective on the many normal and dark types that you will find. It's also a great move for the first gym leader, Roxanne. Much like with the Queen, I ended up being quite high level for this fight because of the growth rate, and that only made the first gym even easier. I resist their stab attacks, and so her Pokémons do not have enough attack to deal any significant damage to Nidoking. The Geodudes last a bit, mostly because Roxanne used the potions on them, but that only means that she does not have them for her ace Pokémon. And so Nosepass falls down too after a few kicks. With this badge acquired, I can do a couple more things around town, and before leaving, we have to take on the optional fight against a rival. Torkoal is still a bit annoying, my moveset is fully physical, and so since it has a lot of defense, it takes me quite a few turns to defeat it. At least I can be happy that I did not get burned by Ember. Once I have defeated Mudkip 2, I can resume our journey, and after getting a couple extra levels, I got to Brawly. I felt a bit more confident this time around because I had Peck, which is super effective on all of his Pokémons. Unfortunately, it turns out that because of the very low base power, Peck is maybe a two-shot on them, which is quite underwhelming. Especially because they can increase their defense, and so my damage gets lower and lower every time. To try to bypass that, I used a Focus Energy to raise my critical rate, and thanks to that I got a lucky crit against his ace to defeat it before he could use any potions or anything like that. With 2 badges in our pocket, we can go to Slateport, where we have to fight against a couple of Team Aqua grunts. They want to steal some engine parts that we have to deliver to a guy, and unfortunately for them, by the time I got to them, I learned Trash. I know I said it's not a great move, but since their Pokémons are so weak, it allows me to one-shot them without any problems. Once Archie told us all about his plans, we can resume the grinding, because the next major fight is going to be against a rival again. The only thing that worries me about this one is her starter Marshtomp, because it now has the move Mudshot, and since it is super effective and stab, it deals good damage. After softening Marshtomp, I switched to Trash to finish off that Pokémon and any other following ones. After defeating May and getting to Mobile, we have a bit more training to do, but the fight against Wattson should not be that problematic. Since I am part ground, I am immune to their stab electric attacks, which are usually the most problematic thing about this fight, especially Thunder Wave. Sure, his Magneton could still confuse me and maybe be annoying that way, but today it used Sonic Boom instead, and that allowed me to reach the Manectric without any status effects. And even his ace Pokémon was defeated after a couple of attacks. With Wattson defeated, we can resume our journey and eventually we get to the Meterfall Caves. Here we meet the two teams and are informed about Max's plan to trigger the volcano, and so we climb it to try to stop him. Of course, since this is a Pokémon, the only way to do so is with a fight. The match against him was a bit annoying, mostly because of the Mightyena with Intimidate. At this point, my moveset is still fully physical, and so that ability allows him to lower my damage significantly. I was also a bit worried about Camerapt and Magnitude, but fortunately he only got a Magnitude 6, which did not deal that much damage. And after a few more turns of thrashing around, I was able to defeat him and move on to the next gym. Flannery unfortunately did not go very well for me. Torkoal was able to infatuate me and paralyze me, which means that I lost a whole bunch of turns until I was defeated. The second attempt went a bit better. The first few Pokémons on her team are not a problem. Camerapt is a bit scary with his ground attacks, but nothing too bad. For Torkoal, I got a lucky poison from my ability, and by using Trash a couple of times, I was able to deal enough damage to her Pokémon to defeat it before it had the opportunity to confuse me, paralyze me, or infatuate me again. After a somewhat surprisingly hard fight, it's time to take on one of the hardest gyms in the early game. Norman could be a problem, because this time around I do not have any move to deal with his counter strategies. I forgot to pick up Dig, and that move could have helped me quite a bit. His first few Pokémons are not that much of a problem either, they all go down in a few double kicks, but Slacking is much more tanky, and so every time he could move, I used Peck to deal low damage, so that counter would not be that strong either. While fighting against Slacking, Norman started using potions on it, but it just worked out such that he was using them only when Slacking could move, and by spamming double kicks over and over again, I just had enough damage to defeat his ace Pokémon without him attacking me again. By completing this gym, we get the Surf HM and we can use it to get to the other side of this region. Here eventually we get to the Weather Institute, where we have to rescue some scientists from one of the Team Aqua admirals. Shelly is, as usual, not really a problem, and so we can move on from that. The next fight is going to be against our rival, and much like in our previous encounter, the only thing that is somewhat problematic is her Marshtomp, but since my damage is good enough to two-shot it, I should be able to defeat it without getting hurt too much. and once her ace Pokémon is defeated, the rest of the team cannot do much either. Moving on, we can now take on the Flying Gym headed by Winona. For this one I used the Thunderbolt TM that you can get with the side quest in Mobile, and since Electric is super effective on most of her team, this fight should not be that hard, especially because Skarmory is a one-shot and so it cannot send attack me. Altaria is the only thing able to survive an attack and fires back with a decently powerful Earthquake, but that is nowhere near enough to take down Nidoking. Once we have obtained this badge too, we can get back on the road, and our next step is in the next town over, where we can take on May once again. She improved her team a bit, but once again, the only thing worth of note is her starter, which of course is not enough to defeat me. A Swampert with Earthquake or even Mudshot could have been a much harder challenge, but unfortunately she does not get to fully evolve her starter in this game. Anyway, after getting the Magma Emblem, we can sneak into the cave where Groudon is sleeping, and after defeating a whole bunch of Team Magma Grunts, we get to the bottom of it, where we see their leader awaken Groudon. Since he used the wrong orb, the legendary runs away, and we are left to fight Maxi. Of course, I don't think I need to say much about this one. As usual, my Tiena and his Intimidate is a pain to deal with, but fortunately this time around it was nice enough to use Swagger on me. While the confusion is also annoying, it soon stops, and so I am effectively left with a +1. That was not enough to one-shot Camerupt, and so it chunks me with Earthquake, but I'm still able to finish that fight. Next we got into the Team Aqua hideout, where we are only able to find another one of their admirals. Once again, my Tiena proves annoying with Intimidate, but that's more or less the only thing worth noting about this match. Golbat tries to confuse me, but it does not work out for him. Next, I did a bit of leveling, because Tate and Liza are going to be a challenge. I was defeated by them in the first attempt, but without leveling up again, I tried them one more time. This time around, I softened Claydol with a secret power before finishing it off with a Shadow Ball. Otherwise, they would keep healing it with hyper potions, and I would get nowhere. From there, his Xatu and Lunaton wasted turns setting up Calm Minds, which I can ignore and bypass with a physical attack, and after a couple more attacks, I can easily get this badge too. Next, we have to go to the Pokémon NASA building, because it is currently being taken over by Team Magma. Here we also find the ex-champion of the region, and we help Steven defeat the leadership of Team Magma. My moveset at this point is not fully physical, and so Intimidate is slightly less annoying, but since Thunderbolt is not effective on the Camerupts, the lower attack is still a problem. At least we are not alone in this fight, and we can count on the help from Steven to defeat them. His Metang starts off playing a bit passive usually, and sets up a bunch of screens, but once it is done with that, it can deal some respectable damage with either Psychic or Metal Claw. After a few turns, by focus firing the Pokémons on the right, I was able to turn the match into a 2v1, and at this point it is effectively over. Even though I lost quite a bit of HP, we still got through this in the first attempt. As a reward for defeating Team Magma, Steven gives us the Dive HM. We can use it to get to the seafloor cave, where we find Archie about to wake up the other legendary. To try to stop him, we engage him in a fight. Things start well for me by defeating my Tiena with a couple of earthquakes, but then I misclick and use it on Crobat too. That gives him the opportunity to confuse me with Confuse Ray, but fortunately that attack did not have any impact in this fight. Of course, even though we won the fight, the story is still gonna story, and so the red orb activated anyway and woke up Kyogre. Now that both of the legendaries are awake, as we leave the cave we see the weather is a mess, and to put an end to it, we go ask Rayquaza for help. The third legendary of the trio soon comes down from the clouds and stops the other two from fighting. Now that the world is saved, we can resume the badge collection, and it just so happens that Juan is nearby. His team is mostly made of water types, which is a bit of a problem for us because of our type weaknesses. Fortunately, his Pokémons are still not that high level or that strong, and so with either a couple of Earthquakes or Thunderbolts, I am able to defeat all of his Pokémons. I even bypass the Kingdra double team strategies since I am able to land 2 Earthquakes back to back. And now that we have all of the badges, we can also use all of the HMs, and thanks to that we can enter the victory road. Here we are immediately stopped by Wally, who wants a challenge. His team is not too bad, but the only real danger is Altaria, because it has Earthquake, but unfortunately for him I get a crit and defeat the Cloud Dragon. With that Pokémon out of the picture, I can sweep through the remaining Pokémons on his team, since Sludge Bomb and Earthquake are a good combo to destroy everything he has. After him and clearing the rest of the cave, I can get to the league, and here I entered only after a bit of preparation. My level is still somewhat low for this point, and since I do not have any move to boost my stat, things could get bad. The first fight against Sidney is a bit annoying. I get intimidated and so my attack drops significantly. Fortunately, his Pokémons are not too tanky, and so even with the lowered attack, I am still able to two-shot his strongest Pokémon. Overall, not that hard of a fight, and all things considered, it could have been much worse if I got unlucky here and there. For the next fight, we have to deal with Phoebe and her ghost types. Of course, the most dangerous thing in this fight is going to be the lead Dusclops using Curse. To block that, I used Substitute, and that was a great move on my part, because apparently Shadow Ball is nowhere near enough to one-shot it, and without the doll protecting me, I would have been defeated. Once the ace Pokémon falls down, the rest of the team is not that threatening. Sure, they are quite tanky and often are not defeated in one attack, and so they can fire back with some decent hits, but all things considered, it could have been much worse. After 2 somewhat flawless fights against the Elite Four, it's time to take on Glacia. Of course, this fight was quite a bit harder and I ended up losing a couple of times. Since I could not even get to half of her team, I used a few rare candies to raise my level to 75, and apparently that was maybe a bit too much. Not sure how, but now I am able to one-shot all of her Pokémons with Earthquake, well, other than Walrein, which survives and hits me back with a quite powerful Ice Beam. But since she does not get the freeze, I can finish the fight the next turn. Well, I'm happy to leave her behind, and next we have to face against Drake. For the fight against him, I used the Ice Beam TM, and of course that move is great for this guy since all of his Pokémons are Dragon types. The only thing that handles this attack quite well is Kindra, but I can switch to Earthquake for that one, and even though Drake tries to keep it alive with full restores, eventually I can get enough attacks through to break through Kindra. Once that Pokémon is defeated, I can switch back to Ice Beam and sweep through his fight, one-shotting all of the remaining Pokémons. And once Drake is defeated too, we only have the champion left. I was a bit worried about the fight against Wallace. His whole team is made of water types, but unlike Juan, these ones are much more tanky and dangerous. Fortunately, the extra levels from the rare candies came in very handy here too, allowing me to almost one-shot most of his Pokémons. Since things were going quite well, I tried to use Substitute against Ludicolo for more protection, but he immediately blew it away with a Surf. And so, after wasting that HP, I had to face against Milotic, which is the most dangerous Pokémon on his team by quite a wide margin. One Surf takes away most of my remaining HP, and so I was a bit worried, but fortunately I get a crit against Whiscash, which allows me to get straight to Gyarados, which gets cooked by a Thunderbolt. A bit of a lucky end there, but I will gladly take it. I do not want to reset anymore in the league. Once again, this is where I usually end the videos, but since I defeated Steven with Nidoking, it only seems fair to do the same with Nidoking. The big difference is that for Nidoking I did not use the rare candies, but even with the extra levels, Nidoking could not quite get through the Claydol. And so I had to go back and level quite a bit in the league. After doing so for a few minutes, I came back at level 85 and attempted Steven again. This time around things went much better. Skarmory is not able to one-shot my Substitute anymore. To be fair, it was a crit, but still that was surprising to see in one of the previous attempts. Claydol is now a clean 2-hit KO with Surf, which makes things a lot easier, but unfortunately Armaldo is still annoying and breaks my Substitute. That would not be a problem, but Aggron survives and hits me with a powerful Earthquake, which deals a lot of damage. Not quite enough to defeat me though, and so I am still in the fight. Steven also throws a few full restores on Aggron, but that's actually good for me, especially because I can one-shot Metagross with a crit. I'm pretty sure that was needed, but the same cannot be said for Cradily. Things were looking a bit bad, my HP was low and he was recovering a lot of HP every turn. Fortunately, I was just barely able to deal enough damage to defeat it, before being taken down by one last Giga Drain myself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, ring the bell and all of that. If you have any feedback, leave it down below and I'll see you next week. Bye!